that really pushed us further, because we invited a lot of people from the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So it allowed us to make some contacts and get invited back from those people, and to know everybody. And then
how did you get into electronic music?
it's a long story. At first, I was producing hip hop and reggaeton,
Oh, cool.
other stuff. I was more in my Latin years, if I can say. And then my buddy Thomas was already listening to tech house and house music, and he showed me a little bit, and I enjoyed it. So I started producing a bit of tech house with Fruity Loops, you know.
Awesome.
So that's it. And one day he came with his disc at my place. It is a hard disk, and he put a lot of electronic music in my computer, and then I got to know a little bit more of it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's about time I introduce you guys, and also introduce
Yeah.
Music.Art.Ppl to anybody who's not familiar. So
Yeah.
Music.Art.Ppl, we're a collective here based in Ottawa. I guess here is relative, right? Because a lot of people are listening from Montreal. But Ottawa-based collective, we focus on doing events, programming events with elements including live painting, visual projections, decorating spaces, and electronic music. And sometimes we also have funk bands and just to spice things up. Now that there's COVID, of course, you know, like any other promoter or event producer, everything has kind of stopped and halted. So we wanted to still showcase artists and help teach people different things, and as a community grow. So we started these tech talks, and yeah, it's been great. This is, I think, the fourth or fifth, and this is the second one where we actually have a producer presenting to us all. So that's exciting. So that's a good segue to introduce Camilo. Camilo's a good friend, and he is part of the Duo Hicky Kalo. They're electronic music producers and DJs out of Montreal, and they've been around for about 6 years or so. They are the owners of, I don't want to butcher the label's name, so I'll let you say it.
Plaisirs Sonores Records.
Plaisirs Sonores Records.
It means sound pleasure in English.
Sound pleasure. And I love their music. I play those tracks maybe in every set in the last 6 months. I've had at least one track from their label. Some of my favorite productions. And so it's really exciting to have you with us, Camilo. And
Thank
just
you.
to mention, in case somebody doesn't know, they've had big names like Hernan Cattaneo, Soul Button, a lot of other names I could think of, Buddha Kids, and Seth Schwartz, and so many awesome names have worked with them. So that's exciting to have you with us. And I could go deeper into your bio, but I think this is a good short introduction. Also wanted to mention that you're also starting a mixing mastering service, correct? If you could tell
Yes, I will start with mixing services because I think mastering is a big thing to learn, you know, and I think I will let me the time to learn it perfectly. Well, not perfectly, but I will just take the time to get better at it until I can offer my services. So for now, it'll be mixing and maybe coaching too.
nice.
For producers and producing classes too. Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, thanks for the invitation, first of all. So yeah, with my buddy Thomas, we have a duo called Hicky Kalo. We've been in the scene for about 6 years. we also, yeah, we have the label Plaisirs Sonores, and it's going well. It's going well. We have put a lot of time into it, and we had the chance to have very good names in the industry, as Hernan and Soul Button. Apart from that, we were just announced that we are resident at Stereo Nightclub in Montreal. So it's good news too. Yeah, apart from that, another background that I have is I'm a music editor for national TV. I mean, I work for a composer that makes music for Radio Canada and TVA in Quebec. And so basically, I'm just a music editor. So I take the stems, the audio, and I mount it with the image according to the director's instructions and everything. And it's something that helped me a lot to learn more about sound and how to take care of quality too. Because television is, you know, it's mainstream, and you always have to ensure that it's top notch. So it helped me a lot as a producer to be more perfectionist on my music. So
yeah, let's jump into the topics.
Yeah, exactly.
Interested to hear about your creative process. Like how do you go about, first of all, I mean, a lot of people kind of struggle with the inspiration, especially if it's on the spot. You're trying to, you're like, oh, I need to finish a track by this date, right? And
yeah.
So tell us, how do you, first of all, how do you start a track? How do you, build on it? What sounds do you start with? Stuff like that.
So before, I made the mistake to always start a track with drums, and it's not a good thing, because the type of music I do is much more melodic, and emotional. So before, I used to start my track with drums and then add the melody. But there's a little problem in that. It's that you will tend to make shorter melodies and not work enough on them, So I think it's always better to start with the melody content. And I think the melody content is always more related to your emotions and creativity, because drums are just drums, yeah, it adds a lot of groove to the track, but in my type of music, I would say the melody is the most important. So when I start a track, it's always depending on what I feel, the emotions I'm feeling. It's really important to listen to yourself when you produce. It's the most important. I would say my music is really related to what I'm living in my life, problems, happiness, any inspiration. So you have to listen to yourself. And I will always start here. I have a little piano, so I will always just not look at my computer and just focus on the keys. Just at first, just starting with some melodies, so I can give importance to it. Yeah, exactly. Just to that, and forget about all the computer and geek stuff, just be authentic and play the keys, so. So
do you have any keys that you have a go-to kind of?
Like a scale?
Yeah, like a scale or something?
I would say C minor. I like a lot C minor because it's just easy to play. But sometimes, to be more original, I will try other tonalities, because if you do all your tracks in C minor, it can be a bit boring, So, but good background that I didn't say is I play piano actually since I'm 7-year-old.
Wow.
I played classical piano, jazz piano. I played at the jazz festival when I was 15-year-old. So I got a good background other kinds of music too. So it helps with the inspiration. And the main advice I would give to a beginner producer, like a lot of people ask me, what should I buy? What VST should I buy? What program do you use? Ableton, Logic, doesn't matter. I would say if you want to do like more, for example, progressive house music, there's a lot of melody into it. So I would say the best investment you can make is just take some music theory classes. It helps a lot. You're going to learn the basic of the keys, and after that, it's going to be way much easier to have inspiration, you know. So yeah, so
Cool.
I just play the keys, and after that, I take the melody that I did and I put it into my program. So
and on the topic of VSTs, do you have any go-to VSTs?
Yes. So now you see my screen, I imagine.
Yes.
Okay. So yes. Well, I have two main things that I use right now. Is Omnisphere. I love it. I can show you here. It's a VST with thousands of sounds. It's about $700 Canadians. But what is great about it is that you have any type of sounds on it, and the way it's made, it's just incredible how you dig for it, you know. So now I imagine you get the sound of my computer if I press play.
Yeah, clear.
Ah, okay, perfect. Yeah, Omnisphere is just great, you know. If I want some, if I want some, let's say I love a lot the ARP and BPM. If I want some bells, I can choose the mood here. Dreamlike. Let's see. Not Christmas bells, no. But let's see, what is that? You know, just that sound is great, you know. You can play with it and just... So if you like that sound, you can actually sound match it. So you press sound match and match current selection. It's going to give you all the similar sounds to it, you know.
Oh, wow.
And I went really fast to get that sound, but there's so much sounds on it. There's pianos, there's anything. So it's a tool that I recently got. I just bought it. But before that, I used to use a lot of Arturia V collection. I guess a lot of producers know it. It's just amazing. It's basically it's all the classic synthesizers, and it's all replicas. And it let you dig in it with the analog lab. It's like a library, okay? So synths, so you get all those, you can see the names of the synths here. For example, this one, it's the Mini Moog, you know, big classic. And the quality is just great. And, you know, and nowadays it's hard to financially to get all the real synthesizers. So that's a go-to for me. It's great.
When you get a new VST, I mean, like there's so much to learn in it or figure out. Do you have a system or you just play around until you find something that you like?
Yeah, exactly. I'm a preset guy, you know. I use presets and I modify them. I just modify them. So, and the synthesizers here, the ones that I use a lot, the SAM, I use it a lot. I use the Prophet a lot. The modular for pad sounds is great, and the DX7 for key sounds, because they're just so catchy and good. So I use it a lot. So that's my big go-to as well. I would say Omnisphere is better for more any kind of instruments, world instruments, bells, real pianos, violins, you know, and Arturia collections is very much for synths, you know, so for synth sounds. And other than that, I have also the complete pack from Native Instruments. That is a really cool pack if you want to start producing as well. So it gives you a lot of plugins. So all of here. So that's all of some FX plugins. So you get a guitar rig. It's a great effect processor. You can put that on any track. For example, you have a piano track. You put this on your piano track, and there's some really great presets on it. If you go into effects, reverbs, and delay, it can give you great sounds, you know. It's just, it's made for guitars, but I use it for everything, and it's just great. For example, in this track I did, that's the track I did with Seth Schwartz that was released recently.
Great track, yeah.
So there's a sound in it that I use specifically guitar rig, and it sounds very cool. It's I called it the fucked up sound because it's a bit fucked up. So now you will hear it. Wait a minute. It's here. So that a bit like fairy sound, you know. I used the guitar rig on it. So basically that sound is a clave sound. A clave is a percussion instrument. So it's just a clave sound that I reversed. So you hear it reversed. And I put some guitar rig preset on it. So a lot of delays, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4 delays and a phaser. But the effect is just great. And it was like one of the last touches to this track. So yeah, Native Instruments gives you a lot of cool plugins that for me are essential right now. Other than that, I have one hardware instrument. It's a Mini Brute, so I have it here. I'll show you.
Classic.
Yeah, so it's I love to just play with it. It's a really raw sound. So I will just plug it into my DAW and play with it and just record some weird stuff with it and keep it and just play with the recording I did and not to redo it. So that allows you to be creative as well, you know. So it's a great synthesizer. It's like $500 and it's awesome.
Do you find it harder to work with audio versus MIDI?
It's very different. It's just very different. In this track, it's a special track because Seth Schwartz recorded on it some violin, and I had to work with audio. So that's why I chose this track, because there's a lot of MIDI and audio into it to show you.
Do you want to play a part of the track for everyone who's not familiar with it?
Yeah. I'll put just before the drop so you can hear it. that's it.
It's a beautiful track.
Thanks, man. So I did this track at first, without taking set Schwartz would record on it, and he came to Montreal, and a good friend from us, invited us to go have a beer with him. So we were really happy, and then turns out that his Airbnb was just near my studio. It was
Nice.
4 streets from here. So I said, yeah, we can go grab your violin and you come back here, and I have a good track I can show you. Maybe you like it. And after a few glasses of wine, he said, oh yeah, it's a nice track. And so he just plugged his violin into my sound card, and with a couple of pedals, FX pedals, and we tried some stuff around, and we just recorded some violin. So I had to play a lot with the dry sound, because finally we didn't use his FX pedals. So I just added some reverb to it, some delay and stuff. So he recorded like 2 parts playing with the bow, and another part playing more pizzicato. So, but I had to play with the audio actually a lot. So that's the pizzicato part. So the original sound that he recorded, it wasn't that.
You just took bits and pieces, or?
I had to use a flex pitch here. I don't know if there's some Logic users here, but so it's an amazing thing in Logic, is that you can just take the audio and the notes and just move them around. It's like an auto tune, but Logic made. So I had to play a lot with it to get the right melody to work with the track. So that was a good example of working with audio.
And so, I mean, a quick question: how do you know when the track is done?
So, good question. At first, without the violin, it's a track I had cooking for a couple of weeks, and I was just missing like this memorable element, to add to the track. So when Seth added the violin, it was like, okay, well, right now it's a memorable track. I think it's really important that your track is memorable, so it's the most important. It's the most important. So I just played around with the stuff he recorded, and Thomas, my partner, he did the arrangement on it. So he chose the bit what is coming the right time,
Nice. What
element is coming. And so if I press A, you can see all the automation. So that's mainly what he does.
Wow.
So
it's a lot of automation.
cut off automations, FX automations here. So Thomas is he likes to do that, and so it was an amazing final product.
It's a good dynamic between you guys.
Exactly. So most of the time I will create a project. I will do a basic arrangement on it, and Thomas will come and put his second hand on it, and what gives a very good product. It's just multiple brains on it, just exactly. And it's really important to sometimes get the track feedback. So you send your track to more experienced producer. So it's really good to have a second pair of ears,
And I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please just write them in the chat. And every once in a while, Camilo will take a break and answer some questions if you have any.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so anything else you want to say on this topic, Camilo? Creative process?
Uh, yeah.
What,
Well,
after the melody, yeah. What
yeah,
happens?
exactly. What happens after the melody? Uh, we talked a bit. We got down the rabbit hole a little bit,
Good.
speaking about the VSTs and everything. But
Yeah.
yeah, after the melody, I start with the kick. I think the whole mixing of your track is based on how with your kick. Everything is like the kick is like the bone, and everything is like meat around. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really important to get the right kick, and as soon as you have a good kick, you're ready to work on everything, on the mixing and everything. So it's the basic of the track. So once you get your melody, you can start working on your drums and sound effects and adding other melodies and and stuff around. So, I got this kick, and as soon as I got all my basic melody happening, just put my kick. Important thing I want to say. I tend to always add some real loops, some audio loops to my tracks to kind of glue everything together. It really helps. So I tend to add a lot some shaker sounds that are already recorded from a professional percussionist.
Nice.
So
Do you have a certain collection of samples?
yeah, I use Splice.com to get some loops, and I bought already some packs on Loop Masters as well. They have a really good sound packs. So, and I get them from any genres of music. I got like a Brazilian percussions sound pack, so it adds some organicity to your track. So yeah, so Splice.com is amazing. You just pay around $10 a month, and you get a lot of samples for free, and a lot of sounds from Splice are actually packs that they're selling on Loop Masters. So it's just amazing to be able to look into Splice.com when you're missing a sound, and I just take all those sounds and I keep them in my computer. I reuse them, and so yeah. So I use a lot of shakers to kind of glue all the drums together. So in that case, I used just one shaker. You have to find the right one again, and then you find other meat to go around your bone. Some percussions, some percussions that you pan left and right to give more image to stereo image to your track. And that's it. You just play with the groove and find the right clap for the basses. I always use like a sub bass just to occupy that zone of the frequency spectrum. And of course, because it's a nice sub bass, and it's my style. I tend to put a lot of like a higher bass.
Mm-hmm.
So I will cut a bit in the lows in the EQ to give space to the sub bass, and it's just gonna give more groove to the track, And I take it progressive house music. There's a lot of groovy bass of that sort,
And when do you use sidechaining?
Okay, so sidechaining, I sidechain on almost everything. So right now my track is split into buses, if you can see. So I have a bus for basses. So basically I group a type of sounds together so I can play with them all together. So I will, on the bass, for example, I will just take the bass bus, and I will just put a side chain on it with the kick drum always, and same for instruments. So I'll take the whole instrument bus. Oh, in that case I didn't do, but I will take main sounds like the pad, and I'll put a side chain on it. Well, here I forgot to put it. But for example, yeah. I tend to do it a lot with instrument sounds and basses and shakers as well, you know. Like for example, here I put a sidechain on the shakers bus with this cool compressor. So it just helps gluing everything together and letting some air to the kick, and that's it. I think it's a big basic of mixing, sidechaining.
Do you use a Logic compressor, or do you have them?
I use the basic Logic sometimes. I also have this plugin API made by Waves. It's a very good compressor. It's not so expensive too, and it's giving me nice effect. Sometimes for sidechaining, I use a different plugin that I just got actually. It's made by Cable Guys.
Mm.
It's very cheap. It's called Shaper Box Volume. So you can choose your kick here as a sidechain, and you'll use they have a different type of waves that you can use for the sidechaining. It's great. You can play with it. You can play with where do you want the sidechain to happen, more in the highs and the mids. You can play with the timing too. So sometimes I think that this plugin is really drastic. So I just take the curve and I reduced it a little bit. So because I want to put it just slightly, and
you don't want to cut too much of the
exactly
sound.
And I think a big error most of producers do at first is to make drastic cuts and changes everywhere. The most important in a production is to have your all your the right samples. You find the right sounds for your track at first. Find the first how do we say it in English? Like la première matière. It's like you find the basis to your track. Mm-hmm. It has to sound good. You find the right clap, you find the right hi-hat, and then after that you do slightly changes in the mixes and the EQ, and don't cut too much, don't boost. Just
and I
work.
think that's a tough thing, right? EQing, like knowing when, like, obviously if something's clashing, you want to
just use your ear, you know. Mm-hmm. Just use your ear, and a very good thing to do if you don't want to EQ too much. Basic that I always do is that all the sounds that are not bass, I just cut the basses in them to let place to the more low end sounds. Apart from that, if two sounds are clashing together, or if two sounds are too much in the same frequency spectrum, you can cut a little bit of the sound. For example, you have two hi-hats, two closed hi-hats, and you cut a little bit in one hi-hat, what the other one is more present in the frequencies. That's a bit
just
hard to yeah, exactly. Just balance. And also sometimes my shaker loops, they are sometimes a bit too harsh in the high frequencies. So I just reduce a bit the high frequencies. That's my go-to plugin for EQ. FabFilter is amazing. It's like almost $200, but it's just so you can play with it so easily. Yeah, exactly. So here for my shaker, for example, I just remove the high frequency. So if I disable, you know, all this these high frequencies are clashing a little bit with the rest of my track, like my hi-hats and everything. So I just wanted to polish a little bit, and I rarely boost my EQ. It's important just to sometimes just cut the frequencies you don't want to hear. Pay attention to your ear, not the visuals, but just what do you hear really. A mistake that producers do is it's doing mixing looking. Yeah, exactly. You have to listen to it. If it sounds good, it sounds good.
Yeah, I mean the plugins can be distracting, right? They're all nice and powerful. And
yeah, you know, you got a new, you got a $300 EQ, and you're like, fuck, I want to use it and play with it, and yeah, just listen to the stuff, listening to your headphones, listen in the car, listen everywhere until it sounds
so
good.
when you feel that a track is done, you render it, you export it, and then you hear it on a bunch of different cheaper.
Exactly. I render it to SoundCloud, and my buddy Thomas, he listened to it. I listen to it everywhere, and I listen to my TV sound system as well at my place. I listen to it on the little Bose speakers, too, and until I get the nice track, everything is balanced. Well, it's done. But sometimes you're done with the mixing, but there's still some musical stuff to arrange in your track. Sometimes you want to add more memorability in your track. You want it to be more memorable. So it's not just quality of the mixing. It's also it has to be musical. It has to be memorable. So that's it. And a new practice that I tend to do now when I mix my tracks is when I'm almost done with my track, I'll just export everything, all the stems, all the audio of each track, and I'll put it in a different project. And I'll just play with the faders, the volume. So I balance my track because then I can really just pay attention to my ears and not the plugins. So, for example, here in that track, that's more like the producing project of it. So for volumes, I never use the faders, those faders here. I always use like a basic gain plugin from Logic to adjust my volumes a little bit. But when I'm done with the overall track, I just export everything and put it in a different Logic project, and then I play with those faders here. And I just really pay attention to the volume. So my track is really balanced. And then I play with the EQ and I just really listen. And then I will add some reverb. It's really important that you respect the order of the mixing, Always play.
Can you tell us the order one more time, just quickly?
Yeah, just volume, because it's the basic. Just play with the volume and panning left and right. After that, EQing. Use your EQ a lot, pay attention to your ears. After that, you'll add all the other processing. So reverb, delays, chorus, all that stuff. I tend to use a lot buses when I put my reverbs. So because it's more subtle effect. If I put my reverb plugin directly on my channel, it will sound too wet, So what I do is I just put it on a bus. That's a basic of mixing. I can put sometimes a little stereo effect on it, like a tremolo, so it moves left and right. I put it on the bus, so I have just a slightly effect of the sound, a slightly part of the sound moving left and right. So mixing is all about like those little thing you do,
subtle pieces.
Yeah, exactly. To everything that gives the overall product.
So I mean, this might
quality.
be a beginner question, but I see that you panned a couple things, but then a lot of other things are not panned. So specific sounds that you choose to pan?
I said earlier that more percussive sound I will pan because they take they're a bit more in the background. They take less space. So I'll pan them to give it a bit more stereo image to my track, and that's it. I don't tend to pan a lot, I think electronic music is pretty focused on the kick drums, so everything turns out around the kick drums, and sometimes some elements go around it. And but what I do is I use a lot of delay, for example, that helps to add more stereo image to exactly. For example, my ARP sound here, just a little bit of delay with the replica delay.
Cool.
Just adds, if I use the ping pong effect on it, it will move right and left. It just adds a bit more of a stereo image, you know.
I like it. All right, well, we have a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, sure. I'll go check it.
So first one is, hey, mixing question here. How do you make sounds wide while still maintaining a good weight and not have phase issues?
Okay. Well, how do I make sounds wide? I will use a lot of chorus effects. For example, my pad sound here. I will use a lot of chorus and reverb to make it bigger and wide, and that's it. For the phase issues, you just have to be careful. As long as you don't use the same delay with ping pong on every sound, you're not gonna have you have to choose which element is gonna be more stereo and ping pong, and what elements are gonna be more mono, you know.
And if you hit a phase, how do you just go back, take a step back, and listen to each sound? And
yeah, that's it. I just choose what sounds, where to put everything, you know. Like I won't put all my instruments in delay and ping pong, you know. It will be too wide, you know. You just have to balance everything, you know, and find the right place for each instrument, you know.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for answering. So there's a couple more questions. We'll go through them. The new electronic music producer, I will write 8 to 16 bar loop that I like, but I struggle to build a track out of it. How do you move on and build a simple track out of a loop?
Okay. So first of all, 8, 16 bar. 16 bar is enough, I would say, to have a good melody out of your track. So as long as you have the good bases, like you can see here on my project, that most of the sounds, they are like 8 bar loops, you know. So that's okay, you know. You just build from it, and if you have 16 bars loops, it's even better, you know. So to answer your question, you could just, it sounds a bit ridiculous, but you just take your 16 bar loop, you just copy paste for 7 minutes, and then you build from that, and you choose where your drop is, and then you do your introduction at the start. That's always the way I do it. I just copy paste the whole thing. I build my drops at first because I want to know what's the track like, what's the style of the track. I do a second drop sometimes. Sometimes I use a track as a reference for my arrangement. You know, I use I don't know, a Guy J or Matthias Mayer track, and I like the arrangement on it. There's nothing bad about it.
It's an idea,
about it. You just get inspired by other producers, and then that's it. Just jump into the pool of just copy paste, and then build everything. You know, you can start with automations. Bring your pad, if you have a pad sound, bring it slowly, and then you bring your percussions, and then you add other melodic elements. If you start building your track like that, you'll find it easier to get along with it, with getting creative and finishing your track. Just throw yourself into it, and it will come. It will come. It's just
And considering, you know, in progressive music, in progressive house, there's always a lot of breakdowns, right? So do you guys have like a fixed formula when you're doing arrangements, like one main breakdown, or sometimes you have two, or like what's your experience with the structure in this genre?
So with the structure, I have like a tradition that it's mine, around 65 bars here. I will put a drop, but it's just me. I think it's the good timing. You have enough time to make an introduction, make dance the people a little bit with the second part, and then you put a loop. But that's my own way of doing. And after maybe at 129 here, I'll put another little loop, loop drop to kind of finish, and then you have a more dancing part. But really, there's no rule.
There's no formula.
Yeah, let me open another project. I can show you what I did. For example, oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. That's a ongoing project.
And as we wait for that to open, I'm going to go on to the next question.
Yeah, no problem.
So Marc-Antoine says, hey, Camilo, thanks for sharing your time with us as well as your tricks and tips. I was wondering if you could explain your approach on how to make your high-end sound tighter, crispier.
Really good question. That's.
I think a lot of people struggle with that, right?
Oh yeah.
Especially, you're EQing here and there, and then things can get out of control sometimes.
You wanna get the more. You wanna your track to be the clearest as possible to your ear, and when you hear it on listen to it on Spotify, you want it to be like other big productions, So that was a struggle for me before, and again now still. But the secret is just finding the right balance into your EQ, not cutting too much in your highs, and just when you find the right balance into with your sounds, you're gonna get a nice track that is just equilibrate everywhere, so balance everywhere. So, but what you can do as well is using saturation. So sometimes I use a plugin, it's called the G37 from Waves. It's gonna bring a little bit of distortion to your track, and that sometimes stimulates the harmonics from your high end. So it's a really good way to add a bit of texture and sparkle to your highs. I also use another plugin made by Sound Toys. It's called the Decapitator. It's quite harsh as a name. So it will it will add some drive to the sounds, and it will stimulate the high frequencies to it. So that's a very good way to get more clear frequencies, and
And with something like that, would you be very selective to only put it on like one sound, so that doesn't create too much clash or anything?
I use it a lot on synth sounds, because I use a lot of VST. Sometimes it can sound a bit computer.
Yeah.
So I add
that digital. Yeah, you want it.
Yeah, exactly. I add that effect just to add some warmth to it, so it sounds a bit more analog,
Cool.
So yeah, I can use it I use it on clap sounds a lot, because sometimes clap sounds tend to be a bit too soft, So I just put I read that the T option here is made for more drum sounds. So I use it on the clap, and it puts my clap way more bigger, and so it's a cool effect, and it's cool to add some warmth to your track, and balance, and get some clear tracks,
That's some good advice.
Yeah. And most of all, I would say, to get a clear image on your track is to have a bit of everything in your tracks.
Have all the layers.
Exactly, all the layers, and finding the right place for everyone. So in that track, for example, have a glitch loop. You can hear it, I think. Okay, so that's a really high frequency sound. So having that little sound to my track helps filling the high frequency spectrum and adding more texture to it, and then it's gonna kind of complement the rest of the drums, and you're gonna have the impression the track is clearer, you know.
Interesting.
So, but that's a project I'm not happy with the mixing yet. I find it's not clear enough. But it's
we were going to talk about arrangement, right?
Yeah, it was arrangement. But still, I can talk of the basics of balance and high frequencies, and you know, that's what I tend to do is just finding the right place for every layer. And for example, the shaker sounds, the shaker loops I put, a lot of times they take a lot of place in the high frequencies. So it's just finding the right balance with everything. And then the next step is when your track is going to be mastered by an engineer, he's going to add high frequencies anyway. So beginners error of production is tend to think that your track is doesn't have enough high frequencies because you compare it to mastered tracks, you know, already mastered tracks. And when you do a mastering, you're gonna add way more high frequencies because you want it to be clear enough. So here I have a Ozone 9 open. It's a mastering program, you know, and what I can do. What I can do to enhance the high frequencies as a master engineer is just go and take a vintage EQ and just boost a little bit the high frequencies. It's gonna sound clearer, you know. So I'd say just find a good balance in your mix and don't worry about the rest. Just
so we're getting some little snippets of unreleased work here, right?
Yeah.
Exclusive.
Actually, I'll continue with the question about the arrangement.
Yes, please.
So
we were comparing, different arrangements. And
just to have an idea, at what time we're finishing this talk?
Well, I mean, we could go a little bit extra, but usually around 9. But we
okay, perfect.
Go another extra 15 minutes or something because it seems there's a lot of interesting questions coming.
Okay, great, awesome. So yeah, that's a track. That's a perfect example of track that, first of all, I started playing with the keys, and it got good, and I was happy with the melody. And then we kind of made a special arrangement with it. At first, we did the arrangement shorter. And then Thomas, my buddy, my partner, he just extended the track to be a very long track. So it's about 10 minutes, the track. But it's a very melodic track. So you get it's a very progressive and melodic track. So it's a good thing that it's longer, you know. So I'm just going to play it a little bit so you can hear. So it's a track with a lot of melodic elements. So it was a good idea to explore a long arrangement. And it was the idea of Thomas to do that. And it allowed me to play and add more melodical elements. At first, well, I would say the main sound is this pad, you know. So that's a melody that I did at the keys, you know, just behind me. That's why I say taking music theory classes can be really useful. So you can
Do some chords.
and play with them and you know, do some variations with them. You know.
I really like
for
the
example,
eagle sound. It's like an eagle.
The eagle sound.
Yeah, it sounds like a bird.
Okay, nice. So you know, I played a lot with the notes with it. I added another string. Again, good advice I can give is not putting too much of one type of sound, because if you have 3 pads at the same time, it's gonna kind of blur a bit your frequency spectrum. So it's important to, again, find the right balance. So if we compare those 2 sounds together, this pad is lower in the spectrum, and then I added a higher sound to just add a bit of melody and warmth to it. And again, that's just something I improvised for the drop. I played it live, and then I tweaked it a little bit. But sometimes what can help is just you record during your drop. You just let way to improvisation. It's a great way to get interesting stuff. And when you improvise, you listen way more to the track and you feel it. So it's a very good way to get along with melodies and everything. Then I added sort of a harp, bells. So that's just a melody that I recorded on top and I tweaked. And then I added some more, let's say, orchestral stuff, because it's a more emotional track. And to add, to give more, add some rhythm to the track too. And I put some stabs, shorter sounds and with delay. It kind of helps building the groove and everything around it. So
beautiful,
that's it.
Camilo. Awesome.
So
Well, there seems to be many more questions.
Oh yeah, let's go along.
So there's another question here that says, asks tips on how to finish your tracks. I always have new ideas, but I struggle to finish my tracks. Plus how to make melodies and harmonies interesting, please. Mine sound cheesy.
Okay. Okay. Tips on how to finish tracks. Well, that's the most common problem for producers, I would say. Like I said, just don't be shy. Just copy paste and then you remove some elements and then you build your track just around your repetition.
And take a class with Camilo and help you.
So yeah, so how to make melodies and harmonies interesting, please. Mine sound cheesy. Well, a really good way again is just investing some time and maybe money into like music theory classes, just to learn the scales and harmony a little bit, you know, and just and so when you say cheesy, what do you mean by that? Like the sound sound cheesy, or the melody sound cheesy? Hmm. It's a question for Salome, but
Well, we'll move to.
Hi,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
okay. Oh, okay.
Go for it.
Sorry. Yeah, I was meaning more my melodies. They sound cheesy, like very poppy. I know
Oh.
of like inversing my chords, for example, to make them more interesting. But I was wondering if you have any other tips, for example.
Okay, okay. Yeah. So to make them more interesting, so I will tend, for example, to start with when you start to track, you start with like a good low end basis, like with as soon as you have your bass melody, you can build around that, and you can separate the melody within different elements. So it's gonna give you a good bass for your melody. So for example, your bass sound. Wait a minute. So if you have like a classic low sound, so you have a classic. Okay, let's say that's your melody. So that's a good bass to have a melody. And then after that, if you have a pad, just doing some simple chords, you know, I'm just gonna duplicate this. Yeah. Let's say, okay. So I'm gonna create it fast. Just to come back to your question, just go really simple first with your basic stuff, your basic melody, so pads and bass. And then for the, I would say like the lead sounds, the sounds that are going to be more memorable, um, tend to be the simplest as possible, and just not adding too much of you know, just be simple. That's the key, to not be to not fall in the cheesiness and everything. It's a bit hard as a question, because it's
Something
more,
that takes years,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. It's something that takes years, but I would say just be basic with your sometimes you don't need to add like another sound to your track. Sometimes the basis of the track just sounds good, and sometimes you're gonna add another sound to it, and it's gonna sound cheesy, you know. So stay simple, and if you find it sounds cheesy, maybe remove some notes, keep the first note of the chord always. For example, if you have a like a F, like a C, A, and F, that's your main chords. Just try to play with those respective chords and not playing other notes that are not related to those chords. And that's it. And a good way too is to just improvise, you know, just like I said earlier, you can just improvise in your drops, and you're gonna pay way more attention to what you play, and by that is you're gonna maybe notice if it's getting cheesier, you know, cheesy, you know. It's all about listening, you know. Yeah.
And I think another tough thing is knowing when you have enough layers.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You really have to be conservative and not putting too much sauce to your track. You know, just it's better to have like 10 sounds that sounds just great, and than having like 40 sounds, and then you know, just be simple, and yeah, just train your ear. Just improvise on your track. Train your ear, play some stuff, show your friends. It's just practice. So that's why I was a bit getting lost with that question, because it's really like practice and ear, you know.
We'll try to go quick through the rest of the questions.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Anything else you want to share, we have time for.
Yeah.
So a question from Payuko, who is saying, if you group tracks or make a bus with some, how do you decide which sounds should be together, or how you decide to separate them?
That's really simple. So I just tend to group all the synth instruments together. So instruments here. So it's easier because generally there are sounds that don't have like transient, like punch to the sounds. So it's easier to play with them together, you know. And again, I just group drums together, and then basses together. Basses together, of course, because they occupy the same zone in the frequency spectrum, the low end, and the drums because they're way more dynamic, you know. They have more attack, and they are really punchy, and sometimes it's good to compress them together, to glue them together. And same for instruments. You want to glue them together, and sometimes cut a little bit in the low end to give some space to the bass, and you want to put a sidechain. Sometimes you want to maybe add some a bit of, you know, crisp to it, like the decapitator, so it's like some saturation to it. And then I have my FX grouped together, just because they're apart from that. And sometimes I will maybe cut the low end of the FX to just make sure there's nothing wrong happening. That's it.
Cool.
To answer your question.
I think you did. Yeah, that was thorough. And so somebody who had asked a question before. Sorry, Yuko?
The audio in the Zoom is in mono.
Thank you.
He's just saying thank you. He's saying thank you. So.
Okay.
And then somebody said, just a comment, I believe the audio in the Zoom is in mono.
Yeah, possible, because we had some trouble before Peter and me setting up the session. So I tried to put my Logic on my sound card, but it didn't work. So I had to put it on the Zoom audio drivers.
You can never win with Zoom. Zoom is just, We'll stop there because it's a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Peluco says Decapitator is amazing.
Yes.
Yes, it is. It's cheap and it's great.
And then Starlight says, a question about the mixing process. I hear a lot of people saying that mixing in mono is a must. Is it a thing you also do? Why is this important? And then beginner question, when you mix in mono, what happens to all elements you put panning on?
So mixing in mono is very interesting, because it brings all your elements just in the, it's very important, it's very useful for frequency balance and EQing, you know, to do some EQ work. Because it just brings everything on the
easier
same,
to hear.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. It brings everything on the same spot in the stereo field. so you can see if there's some phase issue or some EQ issues. And when you put something in mono, I can't show you because of the zoom thing, but you're gonna just hear the track differently. It's just like the same. The two speakers are playing the same thing, you know. They're playing the same thing.
I didn't know about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're gonna hear some panning as well a little bit. I guess I just don't do it a lot, but I should do it way more. Yeah.
And I guess that kind of answers his second part about, or the person's second part about what happens to all elements you put panning on. I guess you bring back the panning after you mix it.
Yeah, exactly. You just you put everything in mono just to hear the frequency balance and work your EQ, and after that you put it back in stereo. It's just a quick way to check if there's any phase issue or EQ problems, you know. I should do it way more. Each time I send my track to Cora, to Mike, he always tells me test it in mono just to see. It's something that I should do way more. Yeah.
And John S. asks, how do you feel about moving away from the 4/4 time signature? Is that too drastic of a change for electronic music?
So right now there's, well, of course, you know, it's house music, so it's the big signatures, the 4/4, you know. If it's not a 4/4, we can talk about drum and bass or drum and bass or dubstep. Yeah, the 4/4 is really like classic house, but there's a tendency to create like side projects and create like ambient music and to experiment. For example, Guy J, he has another label called Armadillo Records, and it's it's just ambient music and more original and different stuff. So it's a really interesting thing. And me, I listen to a lot of ambient music and other types of music. So maybe one day there's gonna be a change to it, but
so it can't be house if it's not 4/4.
No, exactly. It's just a classical signature, of course, you know.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, that was all the questions. So I think we have a bit of time to go over some of your other points that you wanted to discuss with us.
Yeah,
if you haven't already covered them in all of this. So,
I think I covered them quite well.
we talked about starting a track. We
talked about a bit everything. We talked about mixing. A thing that we talked to is sample selection, to just choose properly your sounds to compose your track, and that's very important. You'd rather spend like 30 minutes on finding the right sound than choosing a bad sound and just trying to adjust it. And it's gonna make a big difference in your track and even your mixing too. Because if it sounds good at first, well, it's even better for the mixing, you know. After that. So that's it.
And how do you know when you produce for too many hours in a row? Like,
oh, that's a very good question.
Sometimes you're like, you can't hear the there's just too much information, right?
What do you mean by that?
Like, I just mean like there's you hear the same track for 30
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, yeah, that's an obstacle that you need to be aware. Sometimes it's better to do shorter sessions and more creative sessions than just produce 8 hours producing, because your project at the end is going to be completely different than what you started at the beginning. And sometimes I do the mistake, you know. I just spend a lot of time on the track, and I show it to Thomas at first, the beginning, say, oh, wow, that's cool. Keep it like that. And then I try to improve it. And then 4 hours later, it's like, oh, but it's not the same. You know,
so do you save different versions of it as you go?
you get down the rabbit hole easily, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very good point. You can save different versions of your track. So I tend to do that way more. So so sometimes I do a version, a more intense version, or sometimes, you know, sometimes yeah, it's always important to use that, you know.
And a very important topic that's maybe not as much about making music, but staying mental health, right? Thinking,
Yeah.
how do you balance things, right? Because it's there's so much pressure to wanna, you know, the next track is better than the last one, and you know, you want to stand out, you want to put out great music, but how do you balance that with how do you balance, you know, all of that? Do you tend to, like, any tips you have, like, do you like eat healthy, or do you work out, or any of these, you know?
I do sports. I jog. I go jogging. Sometimes there's a week I'm a bit more lazy, but it's all about balance in your life, and it's my passion. So I invest most of my time into it. So I'm confident that we took the right decisions in our career, and we're moving step by step. And I'm pretty. I take confidence in that, and I think we are just passionate, Thomas and me, and a lot. What helps a lot is just yeah, having a music partner. You know, we are a duo, and sometimes when I'm just tired of listening to a track, or I just don't believe in that track, Thomas says, "Well, what do you say? It's a good track, man," and we get along with it. So it's good to have some friends you can share your music with. You know, that helps a lot.
Is there a time of the day that you find yourself most productive?
There's no rules. There's no rules. I would say, well, like classic day, you know, afternoon, you know, I'm productive and creative. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if anyone has any last questions, now is the time. You can either, you know, vocally.
I just want to add a little
Yes,
detail. Sorry, that yeah, you better produce less hours to protect your ear as well. You know, try to produce at the lowest average, you know, volume possible, so you're gonna be able to produce long hours, because after that you go home and you listen music into your little pods, you know, or Apple or headphones, and your ear is gonna be tired, you know. So it's really important that you try to produce the lowest volume possible. Plus, if you are a DJ and you're always you have gigs and you're always in contact with high volume.
Turn down the monitors. I always tell people, turn down the monitors.
Turn down the monitors. Be careful, you know. Maybe turn them on just one time when you show it to your friend, you know. So that's it. So yeah, you were saying?
Well, I was just asking people to share any more last questions. So we did
sure.
one here. Yuko's asking, when you are arranging, even before mixing, do you apply a limiter to the master to bring the sound higher, or you keep the master minus 8 dB, for example, through the whole process?
It depends. Sometimes, well, it depends if you want to play with your sound card volume, or just put a limiter on your track, you know. Sometimes, yeah, I tend to put a little limiter just to bring the volume a bit up, you know. That's it. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Camilo, thanks so much. Thanks so much for taking the
No
time.
problem.
Thanks to Thomas.
It's a real pleasure to do that, and I feel for me it's I learn a lot just talking about it, you know, because it questions myself on what I do and how I do it, you know.
Definitely.
Thanks, Camilo.
Thanks to you guys for the invitation.
Lots of knowledge
and
there.
yeah, I just want to plug that soon I'm launching my mixing services and producing classes. So I will have a page and everything. It's gonna be called Rivera Productions. So feel free to check it out, and I can help you with the mixing, or I can give you advices on your track. And I'm gonna give free mixings at the start, just to make some promotion and get along with it.
Some
and,
testimonies.
yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Get some practice too. And
Well, would you like to share your email in the chat with everybody in case they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. Right now.
Yeah, please.
How do I do it?
Oh, I think you have to stop the screen share.
Okay.
And
okay.
Guys, thanks everyone again. Thank you for joining us. If you feel like you learned, you wanna please support Music.Art.Ppl and support Hicky Kalo. Follow our page. There's also a donation link that Nick shared earlier. If you feel that you would like to contribute to make more of these happen. Also, we'll be sending you more updates via our email list, so we'll keep you in the loop on future sessions. Thanks again, everybody. Camilo, any last words?
Well, thanks everybody, and don't give up, and just work on your music, and first of all, listen to yourself and to your emotions, because that's what music is made for.
And when is the next track coming out?
The next track, so we're working on a couple of projects right now to we are aiming a bigger label at the moment. Nice. But we have exciting stuff coming along, and also with the label Plaisirs Sonores, we have cool stuff coming along. So stay tuned.
Amazing. Cheers, everybody. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. Peace.
Bye, guys.